Well, I guess it was in my DNA because my father was a forester, a graduate from New York State College of Forestry in '29, and he really got into forestry. Depression time, he got into recreation planning, and he worked at a New York State park. And this was near the Tonawanda Indian Reservation, where then he became the head of the CC camp there that during the '30s, primarily with Iroquois Indians and so forth. Anyway, I guess his DNA went over to me because he taught me about the forest, and I was always interested from a very wee kid. Well, I had primarily a silvicultural type at the New York State College of Forestry, which is now SUNY, and I did have some recreation courses that they also had there too. So my first job was with the U.S. Forest Service in Athens, Georgia, the Southeastern Forest Experiment Station, where I was survey in the mountains of Georgia and North Carolina, determine the type of sites you would have for a variety of mountain species. So I worked on that for a couple of years, and then I went to, well, I also had training at Clemson University for a while, also at University of Virginia, for, but in Georgia I had a lot into ecology, animal ecology, and so I kind of minored in wildlife too. Well, from the Southeastern Station, I felt that I was not really a researcher, and so I got into the irregular national forest system and was transferred to the Chattahoochee National Forest, where I was a assistant ranger on the Chesty district, which is now at Dahlonega, Georgia. After that, I was decided to go to the supervisor's office of the Chattahoochee and get into recreation planning unit there. Years later, I went to the George Washington National Forest, where I was a recreation planner for about 11 years. And then I switched to be a district ranger on the Lee district of the George Washington. And then I transferred to the regional office in Atlanta. And for 16 years, I worked with primarily wild and scenic rivers, cave management, and into trails, particularly the Appalachian Trail and the Florida National Scenic Trail. And that's where I retired from after 38 years. Well, one of the wonderful things about being in the South in Georgia was that there's a fabulous river, wild and scenic, that is the border between Georgia and South Carolina and North Carolina. It rises up in Whiteface Mountain up in North Carolina with its steep, tall cliff, and many small streams come in at that time and form the beginning of the Chattooga River, which runs about 50 miles until it gets to Lake Tougaloo, which is part of the Corps of Engineers, part of the river systems, 50 miles below. And it is a fabulous river. But we didn't know that when I was a recreation planner on the Chattahoochee. Well, we'd gone across it sometimes in bridges and looked down, wow, this is a really nice looking river here. I wonder what it's like on it. Well, the time came that the Georgia Power Company had land, a lot of land up on the upper part of the Chattooga River that they were going to use for a pump storage reservoir there. It was going to be put underwater. But they decided it would be far cheaper and better for them to go down on the Piedmont and start their big lake down there of pump storage. But some of the land there was on the Coney National Forest. So could they make a trade to take some of the Coney National Forest land and trade it for the Chattooga? And they did. So this was 1965, I think, that we were deciding, well, we ought to know a little bit more as recreation planners. What are the opportunities for recreation? Boating, fishing, and camping and hiking. Because we didn't know much about it. Some of the other foresters from South Carolina said, well, they had some experience, but we didn't even believe some of the stories. So we decided that we ought to go and float it. We better go and find out what we're getting into and what we can discover. So the river, like I say, starts in North Carolina and then quickly goes into Georgia and South Carolina, and it is the boundary between the two states for the most part. It even goes by what is now a wilderness that is named after the surveyor that surveyed that property during the War of 1812 when the Cherokees were really mad. So it was interesting that part of the history along it too. Another Charlie Hensley was a landscape architect in our unit, and he was also very interested in exploring the river too, and two others. One was Bob Terry, who was a Navy SEAL, or what the equivalent at that time for a SEAL. And another fellow wanted to go with us. So we started pulling all our things together, and we thought we would start at the top where the power company land. There was a little bit of national forest at the top, but that's where we would start. So we borrowed one of the forester's brand new raft that he had, and these rafts, of course, were used only for downed pilots in the Pacific or whatever. And this one was a two-man raft, and those rafts did not have strong gunnels on them. You couldn't sit on the gunnel; it would be too flimsy. So you had to always be at the bottom. And so we borrowed that, and we had another one, the same type, that would go, and we would two of us would go in each raft. So we started out with our overnight. Well, we didn't plan to go overnight, but we got our lunches and things like that, and other paraphernalia. So we drove to the put-in spot, well at the top of the where you could really float, and we put in. We were all excited about getting into the water. It was up fairly well that day, and so we got started in this big expedition. About a quarter of a mile down, the other fellows in their raft hit a bottom rock and ripped the whole bottom out of this brand new raft that we had borrowed. So we pulled ashore and decided what were we going to do. Well, the three of us couldn't very well fit into a raft, and I surprisingly brought a little one-man raft along that also is for down pilots in the mud. So I got that out, blew it up, and tried it out, and I couldn't control it at all. It just went round circles. It was not made for going down rivers. So we cashed that idea in, and the other two foresters decided, well, they had a shredded raft to take back to the other forester that they had borrowed it from, and they would leave. So Charlie Hensley and I went on down, got in, and decided we'd go, because we had not accomplished our mission. So we got in and started going down the river, and it was not too bad, except the rocks on the bottom, because you were on a flimsy, you had to kneel on this flimsy bottom. So surprisingly, I had brought some catchers, leggings that you put on for catchers, and it helped from hitting the bottom rocks. So we tootled along for a couple miles there. Went very beautiful river with rhododendron on the side, and pretty wild expanse. But we began to move along, and we heard a roaring coming up, and I wondered, what in the world is that? And then we thought, oh my gosh, it's a waterfall. And we had not time to pull to shore to scout it, so we came closer and closer, and the water pulled us right to the edge of the waterfall, and we were going over. And so as we went, and hollering, yelling all the way as we went over the lip and down into it, we both fell to the bottom of the raft, and we thought, this is a bad news. And lo and behold, the raft came back up, and we were okay. I'd say it was about 8 or 10 foot drop. We didn't take a picture of it. So we went on down after we finally made over that, and the river was going a little faster and a little more rugged. All of a sudden, we began to see that we're really in a chasm here, rocky chasm, and steep walls. And gee, this is not like the rest. And so we began to see that we were. This is more difficult with these big boulders. We could see ahead, though, the great big boulders had fallen into the river, and so we pulled out and went up to where the wall was really steep on one side and rugged on the other. And we went, well, we can't get around this side that we are standing, so how could we get to the other side where it looks like we could get over the rocks there? So Charlie said that, well, I'll hold the painter and hold the raft, and you get in and it'll swing to the other side. And sure enough, I got in the raft with my paddle, and he was holding on tight with the flow of the river. But the river went down in a cave formed by this big boulder that was covering over the river. And we could see this roaring river, but we were too dumb not to go back up the river to find a better place to cross. But we thought this could be done. So Charlie swung me out over to a kind of a rock that was level there, and grabbed a hold, but my fingers were trying to claw into it as the raft was being pulled into the hole. And Charlie was holding on the end, but he wasn't holding me. And so I began to slip out of the raft. The raft was going, he had a hold of that, but not a hold of me. And I was going into this cave with all this rushing water. And I slipped and could not hold on to the raft any longer, and I was sucked right into this great big thundering hole. And I thought, oh my, this is it for me. And as we went in, there was a tremendous amount of gushing and water like a washing machine. And amazingly, just amazingly, there was a flat ledge on the side, and I got pushed up in that. I sat there and climbed up on the ledge, and I could still had my paddle in my hand, and I crawled or hunched out and got to the front and waved to Charlie, and he was, he was very happy, and so was I. I was able to get out of the, on that ledge to be able to get on that side, and we went walked upriver a little bit so that we could get the raft, got over that, all over that better side, and it was another much more calm 5 miles all the way down to where we were picked up in our cars. So that was a close call, very close, and I'll never forget that appreciating being saved on the Chattooga River. This was all before Deliverance, which brought so many people to the river and so much interest that it obviously was a candidate for the Wild and Scenic Rivers when that was passed in Congress. So it was one of the earlier ones, and certainly one of the best in the East, or if not the best in the East, for a wild and scenic river. But a lot of people used it after Deliverance really brought people in to try it, and so many were either drunk or not. They were way out of their ability. When I left the region, there about 28 people died from drowning. So we knew that the Forest Service really had to put a lot more stringent rules in for safety and to work with the outfitters to really be able to handle people. And so Deliverance really brought the emphasis on the river, and we're so glad, I'm so glad that I could see it change over the years and become a famous and beloved river today. I was delivered. Yeah, true. I remember when I was probably back in the 70s, we had probably 22,000 members, and we're down to 10 some, which includes students and so forth. So, and a lot of us are getting older. But I think that the society is so important to our professions that it's really sad that we have dropped like that, and yet we still have so many that are graduating in forestry in various type of professions within the ranks of forestry, and that somehow they're not getting the word that the society not only benefits them with the camaraderie of being with other foresters and meeting, learning things that they would not get in their particular area, they'd get from other foresters. So we have that, and we're doing it, and yet there's so many foresters that graduate or get into other type of forestry that don't see the value. But the other value, of course, is for the to really have some power to navigate laws. So you have to have a group that can speak out for forestry. Well, I think forestry is a wonderful, wonderful experience, and some may be a little tougher, more maybe not quite as exciting as some of the things that I've done, but there are still so many places that forestry, we're such a widespread now that you can choose, hopefully, your different type of forest jobs that you would get into. So it does give a lot more for a young forester to look. Hopefully there'll be plenty of jobs yet for the environment, a lot more emphasis in the environment, and forestry will be a major leader, and people will be needed for their skills.